Johnnie Moore, who's a former two-time commissioner to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, is joining us. Johnny, thanks a lot for your time. I was particularly intrigued by your comment where you disagreed with President Obama's statements on minority rights in India. Now, you've headed a body, you've been a commissioner of a body that routinely rates India very poorly and marks India as a country of particular concern, particularly on this issue of minority rights and freedoms. So, could you begin by explaining to me how someone like you, who's been part of this body and has produced those reports, disagrees with President Obama's comments made on Prime Minister Modi and India?
Well, like lots of people in a democracy, I don't choose to believe what I believe based upon what leaders, present or former, say. And I just thought that the former president, who is one of the smartest and most sophisticated leaders in American history, was remarkably unwise to make that comment. In fact, it's suspiciously unwise. I mean, he's not the type of leader that would just say something without really considering it. And so I thought that aside from the substance of his point of view, I thought the timing was just entirely inappropriate. And to say that India would pull apart, I mean, it's like one thing I know about India, and you ask why I have a slightly different point of view. It's because probably because I've spent some time in India. I've been to India more than 20 times, mainly when I was younger, but through the years. And what I find is that India actually, the DNA of India actually pulls together. It doesn't pull apart. It's the more vibrant the debate in the democracy, the more passionate the disagreement when it comes to the religious diversity and 2,000 different languages and 2,000 different political parties, maybe 5,000 languages. Actually, that's the secret of India. The country pulls together. It doesn't pull apart. It's like metal. When you put fire on it, it gets stronger. And so I was just really surprised by the timing, the appropriateness, and the substance of the former president's comments.
What do you mean by the timing of the comments?
Well, I mean, to make those remarks on the eve or during the visit of the prime minister, I mean, that is either intentional or it's a political mistake that should be well beyond a leader with his experience. I mean, there's only one message that is coming from this visit in the United States, and only one message that I think should be resonating with India, and that is that we're entering a new moment between Indian and American relations. The relations have always been good. We're the oldest democracy in the world, the largest democracy in the world. We're partners in all kinds of things. But the takeaway from this visit is that as the prime minister himself said, that it's not that the sky is the limit. It's not even the sky. The sky is the limit. It was an incredibly substantive visit. I mean, you had Democrats and Republicans on the same page. And in fact, in my point of view, whether Prime Minister Modi was your preferred prime minister in India, or whether President Biden was your preferred president in the United States, every single Indian and every single American, whatever their political persuasions, should be standing and applauding this historic moment between these two great democracies. And among that standing global ovation should have been the ovations of all the former presidents, beginning with the last Democrat who was in office.
Can I just press you a little bit more? You were the commissioner of the USCIRF between 2018 and 2021. Now, those are exactly the years when India was labeled as a country of particular concern. The USCIRF routinely raises these issues. In fact, during the Prime Minister's visit, it urged President Biden to raise these minority issues with Prime Minister Modi. It asked for sanctions on such bodies who may attack others, quote unquote, and it also asked for US government to routinely raise these issues, even the US Congress. So I'm just trying to understand, as somebody who was part of this body, why don't you seem to agree with what the body's reports say?
Well, first of all, in the commission, there are 9 commissioners, so it's a group of commissioners, and one of the benefits of being on the commission is the legislation that created the commission allows individual commissioners to express their alternative points of view. And I expressed my alternative point of view because, as I said to plenty of people over the last few days, the United States is not a perfect country. India is not a perfect country. There are always things to criticize. There are always ways to improve, particularly in democracies, because we are so diverse and we celebrate the competition of ideas and different points of view. And every election is an election that's more important than any other. But I thought it was absolutely just an incredible flaw of the system, if not absurd, to say India can be compared in any way whatsoever to the most egregious violators of religious freedom and human rights around the world. We all know what those countries are. We all know what those countries do. We all know what the policies of those countries are, and I just thought it was inappropriate, and I said so at the time. I say so again. And by the way, what also shocked me about the former president's comments, the former president was the president of the United States for 2 terms. He can pick up the phone and call anybody in the world he wants to call, and they'll answer his call. And that's the appropriate way of, even if that is his point of view, a point of view which I think is absurd, to comprehend the dissolution of India. Like, that's there. I was struck when the prime minister delivered his remarks to the Indian diaspora, his last speech, which I attended, and he made a comment about how in the past a lot of countries have sort of been giving instructions to India, but India has its confidence back, and I resonated with that comment, and I think that the former president, if he's got a criticism, you should do what friends do. You pick up the phone and you call the friend and you tell the friend and you discuss it, and maybe there's more information or a different point of view. And that's what I do. And it causes me to sometimes have different views than people that I respect. But my view, to be clear, is that India's democracy is not. Let me just put it even more clearly. India is the single most important country in the world right now. There is no more consequential leader in the world than the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi. And the only thing that the leaders of the United States should be doing now, past and present, is working on strengthening and celebrating this relationship. And when I spent a few minutes with the Prime Minister in my own meeting, I thanked him for bringing together Democrats and Republicans, because we also fight like crazy in our democracy. But whether it was the Speaker McCarthy or President Biden, there was no daylight between Democrats and Republicans on this visit. It was one big celebration, as it should have been, and it didn't need the shade of the former president.
Okay. You also said earlier that India is the most diverse and pluralistic country in the world, and it should be celebrated and not criticized. Can I just ask you, since you have been a part of this USCIRF, many people believe that there are political considerations behind some of its reports. Would you agree with that? Because many people contend that it is unfair on India.
Look, I'm sure there's politics mixed in it. I'm sure there are organizations with political agendas that are involved in every side of this conversation. But that's why engagement is so important. One of my best Muslim friends in the world, in the Gulf, he always says, every time I have a conversation with him, he says, ignorance is the enemy of peace. And I think in the United States, people have a really difficult time understanding India. We have 2 political parties and 380 million people who almost all speak one language. In India, you have 2,000 parties, 7,000 languages. You have more diversity in 1 square mile of Delhi than all of the other countries in the world combined. And so when you're an American, that has a really difficult time comprehending that. If you haven't experienced it, India has to be experienced to be understood, in my opinion, then you are susceptible to lots of different points of view. And that's why it's very, very important for leaders to be very circumspect about what they're saying. And I'm circumspect about what I'm saying. I'm not saying India is perfect, as I'm admitting the United States isn't perfect. India has areas of improvement. But to criticize India like that on that level, it demonstrates a flaw in the system or something else going on. But it definitely is a minority view in the United States. I'm not sure I've ever seen a single foreign head of state receive the type of welcome that the Prime Minister of India received just a few days ago.
You talked about President Obama's comments. Now, one of the other things that people are pointing out is that China and India were kept almost projected to be in the same basket. Do you think that is right or wrong?
It's I mean, I think that just takes care of it. That speaks for itself. To compare China, the Communist Party of China, to be precise, instituting policies across that vast country, to the Republic of India, a democracy with a pristine constitution, with incredible religious diversity. It's absurd. And when people ask me why I had a different point of view, that's normally what I say. I say this, in effect, it put India on the same level as the Communist Party of China. No one believes that should be the case. No rational human being believes that should be the case. And I think that fact speaks alone for itself. By the way, it also puts India on the same level as North Korea. It's like, this is it really is absurd. Friends ought to make friends better. We feel free to criticize one another. In my case, I think leaders of the free world ought to pick up the phone and call one another, work those things out, and then work together to make the world a better place on what really matters. And on that continent, there's a set of values in competition with one another. And India demonstrates that democracy isn't the importation of some Western ideology. Democracy is more democratic. Democracy is more Indian than it is American. In fact, it celebrates diversity, and the fact that it works so well, and how vibrant democracy is in India is an attestation that there's a lot Americans should be learning from Indians. And this visit blessed America. I mean, the partnerships economically, in peace and prosperity, and in other ways, made the world a better place. It's a safer world. It will soon be a more prosperous world, and it will be a better world for all of our children after the visit last week.
Can I ask you a final question? Many in India feel that these reports are biased against India, as I said. They also feel that there are a lot of Islamist pressures, group pressures, that go into making of these reports. But you talked about the fact that many Americans don't really understand India and its diversity. Do you believe that is changing? And as India's position also grows in the world, that this understanding will change and people will come around to what India stands for?
I do think so, because until every American can go to India, and I think that's a wonderful idea. It's not a practical idea, but a wonderful idea. The Indian diaspora is the best ambassador for the Republic of India. They're the most wonderful community in our country, whether it's people that were born in the United States or expatriates that are working in the United States. And that was also on grand display. Indians and Americans are a match made in heaven to make the world a better place. And as for the you can't untangle politics from any of these things, but you have to juxtapose them to different things. It's really hard to say that India is a country that is an anti-Islamic country when the Prime Minister of Modi went on a plane from Washington, D.C. to Cairo and received the highest award that the Arab Republic of Egypt gives to any foreign head of state. I mean, so look, in the United States, we have extremists in every religion, okay? And in India, I'm sure there are extremists in every religion. When you're an extremist and you break the law, we have constitutions, and those constitutions and laws passed by, in the United States, the Congress, and in India, the Parliament, those laws govern when you cross those lines. I think sometimes people don't know the difference, and this is why ignorance is the enemy of peace. We can't have extremism. We must have pluralism. and the vast majority of people would be blessed, as I have been blessed, by getting to know people who are different than them, who believe different than them. And there's no better place to do it than in India.
And my final question related to that, there is also a sense in India that the US is no country to preach us. The very fact that this USCIRF report exists in itself is sometimes questioned. Some suggest that maybe India should also produce reports like these for other countries, including the US. Why do these reports exist, and why do they comment on other countries? And do you think the US in any way has the position to quote unquote lecture other countries on religious freedoms?
Well, look, I mean, we have a set of values that are important to us. India has a set of values that is important to the Republic. Indians are criticizing President Obama right now. That's fantastic. It's a democracy. That's what we do. It's not inappropriate to have these opinions. It is inappropriate for leaders to inappropriately use their platforms. Now, so if India wants to create their own commission, more power to them. They can go for it. I do think perhaps India should engage on this subject in a more meaningful way. The current chair of the commission is a prominent rabbi in the United States of America, who's been to India on multiple occasions, and introduced me to one of the most prominent Hindu leaders in all the world. It might be a good time for the first time, to engage the conversation a little bit, so that everyone's not speaking past each other, because it's a better story to tell in India than it's getting through in the United States. But the United States really shouldn't be in the business of lecturing, and India shouldn't be in the business of lecturing. As democracies, we should always be in the business of having a conversation with one another. And when people disagree, as I disagree, say it. And the proof is on this. The proof is in the experience. Ignorance is the enemy of peace, and that's a lesson for all of us. We can all do a better job of educating our children and the next generations on people who believe differently, look differently, talk differently, have different experiences than all of us. And there's nothing in our world that cannot be better tomorrow if India and the United States join forces.
Johnny, I'm sorry I'm taking more time, but I have a couple of quick questions. One is, did you think the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi answered his critics well enough when he was posed this question about minority rights in the press conference?
I do. I mean, I thought, everybody was working themselves up over whether a question like that was going to be asked, and how the question was going to be asked, and who was going to be asking it. I didn't see a prime minister who was intimidated by any question whatsoever. I thought his answer was clear. And that's why there is a point where engagement on the issue can help move along the conversation. Not everyone is acting in bad faith. Some people are acting in good faith. They just don't know the difference.
Okay. My final question to you, I was reading on your own pages that you're a reverend yourself. You're a self-confessed evangelist. Now, one of the things that the USCIRF looks at is attacks, quote unquote, or violence against Christian missionaries. And that forms the bulk of their complaints that they receive. And that gets juxtapositioned with other minorities, including Muslims, even though they don't really have the data on attacks on Muslims. So I want to understand from you, as a person of faith yourself, as a self-confessed evangelist, how do you look at the charges that Christian missionaries are under attack in India?
I think we have a robust dialogue between Christians and the Jewish community. We have a robust dialogue between Christian leaders and the Islamic community. We don't have a robust dialogue between Christians and the Hindu community. And one of the things I want to work on is building bridges between the two communities, because there's a vast amount of misunderstanding. And when that misunderstanding happens, it ends up causing unintended consequences. And India's constitution is fantastic. You have everything you need in that constitution. It's everything is right there. What we don't always have is the people-to-people relationships. And it's important to remember, as a Christian in the West, that one of the oldest Christian communities in the world is in India. In fact, he's my favorite apostle, the Apostle Thomas. I love him because he doubted Jesus, and all the other disciples wanted to get rid of him. And what did Jesus do? Jesus was okay with Thomas doubting him, and Thomas ended up becoming the apostle who traveled all the way to India. And so you have Christians in India whose lineage goes back 2,000 years. So I think there's a lot of work we can do to build bridges between the Christian community and the Hindu community to make sure that there aren't misunderstandings that lead to unintended consequences. And by the way, I'm an evangelical. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not an Orthodox Christian. I'm an evangelical. There are at least 600 million of us around the world. It's probably more like 700 million. There are more of us in China alone than there are members of the Communist Party. It's time for a robust dialogue between the evangelical community and all religious communities. There's more church than just the Catholic Church.
Okay, all right, Johnnie Moore, I do appreciate your time. Thanks a lot for speaking to us.
Yeah, thank you very much.